The story comes to us from NBC's 12news.com. Going back to Mesa, Arizona, I think I spend as much time in Mesa, Arizona as I do in Aurora, Colorado. I've done so many stories on Mesa. And I don't know, does the mayor and city manager, do they even care? Does the mayor just go, all right, chief, just make sure you don't kill nobody? Mesa is, I don't get it. I don't get it. Mesa, Arizona, I'm never going to Mesa because I might get beat up by the cops just for looking at a cop car. Mesa, but also this one, I saw it on YouTube by a content creator named Spitting Cobra Cop Watch. Spitting Cobra Cop Watch. He uploaded this news story, and I went to Google and I looked it up. I found it under NBC's 12 News, and I read through it. It's going to shock you.
Well, now from the 12 News I-Team, our investigation into a Mesa Police Sergeant continues as we learn more about his disciplinary history.
Body camera footage shows Sergeant Drew Young making inappropriate comments about his female colleagues. Bianca Bono joins us live. And Bianca, this isn't the first time that he's been in trouble.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. He has a long history of internal affairs investigations and has even been recommended for termination 3 times. But instead, he was promoted.
I would blame the organization before I would blame the officer.
I don't know who this person's fairy godmother is, but I think there has to be one. Or you have a department that condones this.
A Mesa Police Sergeant Drew Young was standing with some other officers in the city jail's Sally Port, July of 2020. Body cameras running. When a woman walked by, it was another officer. Sargent Drew Young said, I've heard she's one of the few females that looks better in uniform than she does out of it. Usually it's the other way around. Another officer asked, have you seen her Facebook pictures?
Mesa Police Sergeant Drew Young suspended for 80 hours without pay and given a 1-year probation for talking about his female police colleagues like this.
Her mouth is gonna slap no. I didn't know that she plays for the other team. She actually looks kind of girly.
The I-Team learning this conversation caught on camera was far from Young's first time in trouble. In fact, it's at least his 21st, dating back to 2008, 3 years after he was hired. In 2019, Young was given verbal counseling for leaving an inappropriate comment on a new officer's Facebook post. Months later, in January of 2020, Officer Young was promoted to sergeant.
Have you seen her Facebook pictures? I mean, I wouldn't turn it down.
He's recorded making comments like these.
I've heard she's one of the few females that looks better in uniform than she does out of uniform.
Experts shifting their focus to police department culture, wondering why repeated violations were allowed to happen.
He'd been recommended for termination 3 times prior to his promotion, which is the part that I think is so abnormal.
They're talking about other cops. Now, of course, it's chatter at work. You do it, but not on body camera where it's going to be released to the news. Now, again, like I said, this entire conversation was caught on an officer's worn body camera. Young was investigated by the department's internal affairs unit. The conversation here that I just gave you isn't really what's surprising. What's surprising is this sergeant.
Mesa Police declining 12 News' repeated interview requests, writing in an email that Young had 3 years of positive reviews in his file, but not acknowledging Young's lengthy history of internal affairs investigations, including recent years. Records obtained by 12 News show Young was criminally investigated for submitting fraudulent overtime requests. Prosecution was declined, but he was investigated internally, where police staff also accused Young of failing to complete a rape report, failing to complete an armed robbery report, among a number of other violations. This is the first time Young is recommended for termination. Instead, he was suspended for 2 days. And the internal affairs investigations kept coming. In 2014, Young's most severe penalty of his career, after he had a picture of a suicide victim on his personal phone, which investigators found he showed to colleagues and family members. He was suspended for 240 hours and given a 1-year probation, despite a commander recommending termination termination again. From 2015 to 2016, investigation after investigation. Then Chief John Mesa writing he was calling into question whether Officer Young has the necessary skills and intellectual maturity to perform as a Mesa police officer. For a third time, termination was recommended, which again didn't happen. Instead, Young was put on probation for a year.
Now, Young's firing was recommended 3 separate times, including by an investigative board, the department's then chief. At the time, the police chief had he's been recommended for termination 3 times. He's still working there, but guess what? He's a sergeant. Yeah, he got promoted. Recommended him to be fired 3 times, and what do? Let's just promote him. That way he's not on the street anymore. He's now a sergeant. The story, which if you click the link in the description box below, will take you through some of the things that he's been investigated for throughout the years. In 2019, he received verbal counseling for an inappropriate remark on a new officer's Facebook page. Welcome, buddy. It's a tradition. Our first call together needs to start with us busting in the door, followed by, we're here to F shit up. A few months later, they promoted him to sergeant. Hey man, we love this dude. F shit up. Yeah. He's a real door kicker. Make this guy a sergeant. He can lead the way.
Mesa community advocate Pastor Andre Miller has concerns too.
They have a history of, a slap on the wrist, probation, and, walk a line. Then after a few years, it falls off, and then you can go back to your malfeasance or bad behaviors again.
The Mesa police chief declined multiple interview requests to discuss Sergeant Drew Young and the department's decision-making process. But the city manager and council oversee the police department, so the I-team turned to those leaders. After declining to speak with us multiple times via email, we decided to show up here to city council to try and speak with the city manager, but he avoided us and walked out of the meeting before it was over.
When you reach out to people who are supposed to represent me, it's horrible that they give you silence and don't give you an answer. Because not only do the news you want to know, but I live here in a community. I want to know what they think.
And we want to point out that it was whistleblowers in Mesa that brought this case to our attention. And they, along with many others, have pointed out there are a ton of really great people and police officers in Mesa, including those who brought this to us and want to see some change.
I think Mesa, Arizona needs to be turned over to the Attorney General or the Department of Justice. What do you think?